And at that point we can stop. We don't have to go any further because it doesn't meet our requirements. But let's suppose, let's change this matrix slightly and go, I've run out of room. Let's make another one. Okay, so we have this matrix now. So when we're looking at the rows, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 is an even number, so we're okay. We come down here and we've got 1 here, another one here, so we had 2. 2 is an even number, so that's okay. So now we start looking at the columns, and so we've got this one. Okay, there's 2 there, so that's okay. And then we come here. Oh, there's only one number 1 in this column, so that's no good, and we can stop. So that gives you an idea of how we're going to approach this problem. So with that, let's go into Eclipse and code something up. So what I'm going to do is create a new Java project, and we'll call this one even ones. And I'll make a new Java class that is also called even ones. And the first thing we're going to do is, when it's loading, the first thing we're going to do is skip our main method and look at the method that tells whether it's even ones. So what we're going to have is a public static Boolean method. It's going to return true or false. And we're going to call this method has even ones. That's what we're going to call it. And it's going to accept one parameter, which will be a 2D matrix of integers. And we'll call this matrix just to be easy. So what we're going to need in here, remember that we need to look at the rows and the columns separately. So we're going to have 2 sets of for loops, and each one of these is going to have a nested for loop that looks at the individual elements in each row or column. So the first one we're going to have is for int I equals 0, I less than matrix dot length. Yes, oh, okay. I plus plus, and then the first thing we're going to do in here is declare a variable, and what we're going to do is count the number of ones that we find. So int one count, and it's going to be initialized to 0 because we haven't seen any yet. And now we're going to have our nested loop. So for int j equals 0, j less than matrix at index I dot length, j plus plus. And what we're going to do in here is, if the element at index ij is equal to 1, we're going to add 1 to our variable. So let's do that. If matrix at index ij is equal to 1 count plus plus. So that looks at a single row. So now what we're going to do is, before we break out of our outer loop, we're going to make sure that we found an even number of ones, which is pretty easy. If 1 count modulus 2 is equal to 0, in other words, if we divided by 2, and would we get a remainder of 0, which is okay. Oh, hang on. This should be a does not equals. If we didn't see an even number, then we're going to return false, and that's it. So that takes care of one of our conditions. We've looked at the rows, now we need to look at the columns, and it's going to be a very similar approach, just with the order of the arrays backwards. So let's have a look. For int j equals 0, j less than matrix at 0 dot length, j plus plus, and now we're going to do the same thing, declare our variable. Now we're going to have our nested for loop. Using I as the operator there. And now what we're going to do is do exactly the same, excuse me, exactly the same comparison. If matrix at j equals 1 count plus plus, oops, that's meant to be a semicolon, and exactly the same check outside of our nested loop. If one count modulo 2 does not equal 0, inside here we're going to return false. So if we get, so now we've have our two examples of where two cases of where we return false. If we make it through both of these loops without returning, we can just return true because we've checked every row and every column. Oops. Bit of a typo there. Return true. So there is our method for testing out whether we have an even number of ones. So let's now move to our main method and write something to test this. So public static void main string array args. The first thing we're going to do is declare our new 2D array. So int array matrix equals new int 6 6. So we'll have a square array with 6 rows and 6 columns. Now what we're going to do is fill this up with random numbers, and that will work pretty well. So for int I equals 0, I less than matrix dot length I plus plus. For a nested loop now, int j equals 0, j less than matrix at index I dot length j plus plus, and now we're going to put in a random number, and we'll also print this out so that we can see what our matrix looks like. So matrix at I j equals math dot random, and what we're going to do is just fill it up with the numbers 0 or 1. So we're going to multiply this by 2 and then typecast it to an int. Remember that math.random returns a double, and we don't want that. So int, oops, and I'll put parentheses around here just to be safe. And so now what we'll do is print this out. So system.out.print matrix at I j, and then outside of our inner loop, but still within our, I guess, first loop, we're going to put a new line character. So just a system.out.println, and that's it. So now what we're going to do is call our method. So if, we're going to have a condition here. What did I call the method? If has even ones matrix system.out.println, if that's false, then we'll print out the fact that they all didn't have an even number of ones. Oh, I'm struggling with my words a bit this evening. Oops. What is going on? There we go. So with that, that's enough just to test our program. So let's run this now, and I'll make this a bit bigger so we can see what will happen. Alright, so here we go. Here is our matrix, and we can see here, let's find an example. We've got, okay, so there's 4 ones there, 4 ones there, 2 ones there, 3 there. So that clearly didn't meet our requirements. So you can see here that that's looks like it's working. We definitely found a false case okay. Now, unfortunately, you know, we have a 6x6 matrix, so there's 36 different elements that could either be on or off. So we have the odds of me finding one that matches the requirements of this are kind of low. Let's make our matrix a little bit smaller so we can see this in action and hopefully find one that matches. So let's just make it a 2x2 matrix. And now let's run it. Okay, so that's no good. Nope, that's no good. That's no good. That's no good. We really need this to say 1, 1. Let's make it even smaller. Let's make it a single row, a single column matrix. Eventually, Okay, so that doesn't work either because we only have a row of 1, so it's impossible for it to get an even number of rows in that. But anyway, if we filled this with data that we knew was right, I'm pretty confident that we'd find that this worked just fine. So with that, that's really all there is to this video. So just to summarize, what did we do? Well, we wrote a program to determine whether a 2D array contains an even number of 1s in all the rows and the columns of that array. So we had to check the rows and columns separately, and we used 2 sets of nested for loops to separately check the rows and columns. So with that, that's it for this video. Thanks a lot.